Okay. You want to talk about EDSO? Do you feel like you could explain that pretty well?
Oh boy, can I! My life is EDSO. I have experienced all areas of it.
Yeah.
I raced mountain bikes professionally for a few years, and yes, I was high for 2 years on endorphins.
Yep.
And I had a coach that would stand on top of a hill. You know, I was a cyclist, but we'd have to run with $100 bill.
Right.
And he'd do things all day long. He'd give us he gave us dopamine hits all day long.
Yep.
And so just to go to it, and so the audience knows what EDSO is it stands for endorphins, dopamine, and
serotonin
and
oxytocin.
And it's the four main chemicals that control our emotions. Mm-hmm. It's really, and when you always hear me say it's biology, this is the section I am specifically talking about.
Literally biology.
And so it's literally biology. And so what we're really talking about is chemical dependency. And so this is a great conversation for alcoholics, drug addicts. It really, and even if you're an enabler or anything, to me, this is this first subject that any of them should ever study, because this is why.
Yeah.
This is the truth.
Yep.
This is the biology behind it specifically.
Right.
And so we get all these chemicals. So what he's going to say is the selfish chemicals is the ones that I've just kind of talked about. Mm-hmm. The endorphins, the runner's high.
Sure.
And what is endorphins? It's designed for humankind for the hunting and gathering, and same with the dopamine, and I'll get into that. The hunting and the gathering and protecting ourselves. The reason that we have endorphins is when we're running from an animal, we have to have the ability to outlast him because we don't have the ability to outrun him. Mm-hmm. And we do that through endorphins. So what endorphins do is they actually mask the pain. Hence the reason that we call it the runner's high. High or
he calls it our own personal opiate.
Our own, yeah, exactly. And if you are a true runner it's like you know what I'm talking about.
Right.
You could go to a point where you release endorphins where you get goofy, very goofy. So, and then dopamine. Now, dopamine. I'm been driven through business and sales all of my life. I have had a carrot of juicy dopamine all of my life right in front of me.
Yep.
And I was and have spent most of my life so addicted, much more than probably drug addicts or alcoholics. That's why I say, you know, and I understand it. It's the same thing. It's the same chemical.
Right. Same thing in your brain.
What makes a drug addict or a alcoholic, it's the dopamine hits.
Right.
That's being released.
Yep.
And so what we really talk about in Seth Godin all the way to Simon Sinek, and in almost every book that we talk about, dopamine is always going to be part of it.
Right.
And it's because it's the incentive drug.
Right.
Another one that he had used is a list, and I do this all the time, and I think most everybody, our whole audience, will be able to identify this. You're writing a list, and you got a grocery list, and you got to go to the grocery store. You got to go to the post office, and you got to do this, and then you got to go to the dry cleaners. And then you're coming home, and it's like, oh, man, I got to go buy the bottled water. And you'd forgotten it wasn't on your list.
Right.
So you get home, and you write bottled water, and you
cross it off.
Cross it out right then and there. So you get the dopamine hit.
Exactly.
That's why you do it. It's the incentive chemical.
The feeling of satisfaction when you've completed a task.
The feeling of satisfaction. Absolutely. And if you go back to caveman days now, is what what motivated you to go hunting before you were starving. It gave you hits. When you really go out there and you push your limits out in hunting, you get dopamine hits.
Yeah.
And so it was designed for us to be the incentive chemical. So used correctly, it's great.
Yeah.
But it is highly addictive, and used incorrectly, like most of us, and I will not deny it. It's used more often in a selfish, in a non-productive way. And then the SO, the selfless drugs, where really long-term thinking comes from. So serotonin is a leadership chemical. As social animals, we all want approval from our tribe. And more importantly, we actually need it. That's just
Right.
how we are designed. And so serotonin, and one of the stories that he told was the graduation. It really helped me because been through many graduations. And this is why it's the long term. So you go through college, you've worked your butt off and you've earned something. And now you're going up there and you're on stage and you've got all of these serotonin chemicals going through you because you're proud of yourself.
Right.
You've worked really hard.
Sure.
Now, what I found great about his story is it doesn't stop there. The parents in the crowd have the serotonin running through their veins, no different because they're so proud of their child going through the college.
Exactly.
That's long term. That's a chemical I think that we all want.
Yep. And I think that's really important for the leader, like we're talking about, right?
Because that is getting back to how we were
proud
talking
about
about
your
the leader.
team.
This is the biology, and that's what your employees, it's what your kids, it's what they expect from a leader.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's what they want in return.
Yeah.
And that's what makes the team work.
Yes.
It's biology. This isn't guesswork no more.
Right.
Now we're talking about true foundational biology that can make a company so huge. The next one, oxytocin, the love chemical.
Yep.
And people, okay, what does that got to do with business? Shake someone's hand.
Right.
And he tells a story that about doing a deal, and it was in a podcast though. I mean, not a podcast, just a TED Talk. And it was hilarious. And he's just going around, and so he pretends that he's the salesman. He gets this deal, and the customer's ready to do the deal, saying, "Yeah, I'm ready." And so Simon puts his hand out, like, "Okay, let's do the deal."
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh no, I don't need to shake your hand. I'm ready to do the deal."
Right. Just the fact that person wouldn't shake their hand.
Oh, that story
makes you question whether or not you want to do business with them.
Absolutely. And at worst case, you're going to question.
Yes. At best case, you're going to question.
Yeah, at best case, you're going to value it. It's not, you miss the human connection.
Right.
And of course, hugging and all of those are the big ones.
Right.
Of the oxytocin. And then the next one is the real one that we have to learn to manage. So those four, and that's why I think the more you understand, the more that you follow this, the more it's easy to catch yourself and be aware of your day.
Yeah.
But the next one is the real one that you have to manage, and we've been talking about it. And what Simon calls it is the big C, and it's cortisol. And it's the chemical that's released that what we get from Seth Godin is the lizard brain.
Right.
So this is something that in most every high successful book or motivational, we're going to be talking about in one way or another, because it's the flight or fight.
Right.
And it's where if you don't manage that, bad things happen.
Yeah.
And that's where the emotions can lose control. And so really to have control of your life, emotional intelligence, is to understand that lizard brain, to understand, because it's going to happen. It's part of us.
Sure.
But to understand and identify when it happens and how to deal with it is critical.
Yeah.
And so what happens in companies without the safety net is that cortisol is one of the chemicals that's measured high in companies that don't have the safety circle.
Yep.
That chemical's being released in them all day long. They don't know if they're going to get fired. They don't know each month. Hey, I had a great month in sales. Next month I had a bad one. Man, are they going to fire me?
Right.
When you have that level of stress, you're releasing that cortisol.
And it's physically bad for you. He's saying our jobs are literally killing us because we're so uncertain about everything all the time. We don't know if we're going to be able to keep it. We don't know if we're going to be there next week.
And so what happens is when we have those doubts and those anxieties, our body releases cortisol for survival.
Right.
Not understanding that it's not really, because back in the caveman days, or when what we were designed for is survival, to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And but today with the abundance, we have more than we can eat. We have so it's just a different way, and we have to learn to manage it differently.
Right.
So the next one, and I kind of talked about it, this is probably one of the most intense theories I've heard.
Yeah.
when I had to reread it to make sure that I read,
I know where you're going,
was true. So this is about a company, Next Jump, and Kim being the CEO, and so he's running the company, having success, but doing well. But he all of a sudden decides that he wants to make a bold choice, huge choice.
Yep.
Lifetime employment for his employees.
That's a big deal.
When we talk about it, you're like,
right,
employment, and that's a hard concept.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to be a little slow here to let it resonate in people's minds. Lifetime employment.
Right.
What kind of a commitment is that? To me, this is one of the most extreme, intense commitments you can make. I mean, a lifetime. I mean,
so meaning once you hire somebody, they have a job forever if they want it.
If they want it. That's exact. And we're talking very clear, simple terms.
Right.
It is what it is. Exactly what you said.
Yeah.
No exaggeration. This is what he's set out to do. So obviously, what does that bring up? You better be darn good at hiring, training, and development. But what he compared it to was raising kids.
Yeah.
We don't get to choose our kids.
Right.
We have to train them and develop them, and we have to be committed no matter what.
Right.
And that was the theory based upon this, is that it's based upon the leader, not the employee. It's the commitment of the leader to coach and develop nonstop, always.
Yeah.
And once you start to look at it in a different way, okay, I'm going to develop them. I'm going to give them the tools. Obviously, you have to hire people that are willing to take that. This is what's amazing, is that the first year that they did it, they had 25% growth.
That's crazy.
The year after that, and many years since, they've had over 60% growth rate.
A year.
That's
a lot.
With turnover rate of 1%.
That's insane. 1%.
1%. I'm getting chills even talking about it because it's so intense.
Yeah.
Now, even I have to question it a little bit. But the numbers don't lie.
Right.
This is the one thing. And so Simon's not the kind of guy to stop there. He's like, whoa. Yeah. He goes and talks to the employees and finds out that many of them have been offered more money.
Right.
And they choose to stay in the circle of safety.
Right.
Over money.
Of course.
1% turnover rate. That's probably the people that didn't go for more money. They probably went for a job with less responsibility.
Right. Yeah.
And so the moral of that story is that he ran on serotonin and oxytocin for long term.
Right.
Obviously, he's using endorphins and dopamine. It's just a way of our life. But his company is grounded on serotonin and oxytocin.
Yep.
I will tell you, that is probably one of my favorite topics to ever talk about.
Yeah.
Because it's at the root of it. And it really, for me, is a very humbling conversation. Mm-hmm. Because you could look at drug addicts and alcoholics and all these people. What that does real quick is it puts you in the pool of everybody.
Sure.
Like that.
Right.
You're a human being. You have the same issues and the same chemical reactions.
Right.
Now, some people may manage them better than others. And what I found when I was reading it is that, wow, I have an addiction to dopamine. So what makes me different than an alcoholic?
Sure.
I may function better,
right,
and I may have some, but I need to manage it to be happy, no different than an alcoholic.
Right.
So that's what I found. It was a real humbling, especially in comparison to the next subject where he goes into talking about the alpha.
Yeah.
Because he kind of reverts. And what I think that all the books that we talk about, everything, is that they're really trying to pull you in all of those areas and not just one area. If you want to be a linchpin, and something that he really talked about alpha, and so the audience knows. And I don't know if the audience more so has the opinion that I did or not. I thought an alpha was born. I thought an alpha was a personality type type more so.
Yeah, me too.
Than not. And I've studied personality types, and the one thing that was never mentioned in all my years is alpha, but nonetheless, my perception was an alpha was the strong, dominant, and born that way. Mm-hmm. But the reality is in different situations, you can have different alphas. You can have somebody very strong and dominant in a certain subject or a certain event, a certain sport.
Right.
You can have alphas come out, and then as he started to talk about that, it really opened my mind. It's like, and so with that, I don't think it takes much imagination to understand that really alpha is not something you're born with. It is something that can be created.
Sure. You know, one of the things he said was how this pertains to business. If you want to be a great leader, those who work the hardest to help others succeed will be seen as the alpha.
It's not something you're born with.
Right.
Something that
you can do
create.
it. Yeah. You create it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I got from it too, that I was, I think I've always known, but it's something that should really be talked about, because we all accept the alpha. We expect that our boss will make more money than us.
Right.
We accept it. Just what I was talking about is the famous people getting like the best looking mates. We expect that.
Yeah.
We do. Alphas get more status symbol of wealth. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that he was talking about is that we get serotonin hits. Being an alpha, it's a good thing.
Sure.
We get many, and so when we go out and work really hard and go buy some nice clothes, mm-hmm. we get serotonin hits from it.
Right.
We earned it. One of the things that I thought was really funny, because a lot of companies try to fake it. So if you just go try to fake it and you go and try to pretend to be somebody you're not,
right,
you don't get serotonin hits. It has to be genuine.
It's got to be real. Yeah.
It has to be real.
Right.
That's why you get the hits. I thought that was a great, because I see people trying to fake it. And that's not going to get happiness.
Right.
It's not where you're going. It's the wrong direction. It will never work.
It goes back to authenticity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got to be real.
You have to be real. And we're talking biology. So it's not something that can be fooled.
Can't trick it.
You can't trick it. And you can't get around it.
Right.
It's not magic.
Right.
It's biology.
Yep.
Alpha is what he's saying is the true leadership. They're usually stronger, and the employee pool expects them to be stronger. We do as humans, because if we go back to the caveman times, that's where the alpha really came about. And what the alpha was usually is faster and stronger. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, it was his job to run out in danger first to protect the others. He was stronger. He was more dominant. And more often what I find is that is a mindset. If you want to be faster and stronger, the chances are you will be.
Right.
You have to work at it.
Yep.
But there is consequences that come with it. You know.
Yeah.
Everybody else expects you to be the leader.
Yep. Take more hits.
And you have to, exactly. But what I thought was amazing is, because we say all these things, and we're going to say even a lot more of how hard it is to be the linchpin, how hard it is to be the alpha, how hard it is to be on that side, how hard it is to raise yourself in the corporate ladder.
Right.
But you get more serotonin and you get less stress. It's what we're supposed to do as humans.
Right.
It's really pushing the human element is what you're doing. Some of the other things that he's saying, and just the serving is, and I felt this. I was a manager of a very large MarineMax dealership. So I had a couple locations down in the Southern California area, San Diego mainly. I was married and ended up, the wife gets pregnant. And I'm managing these dealerships. I'm working all the time, and I was scared. I won't deny it.
Right.
And so I went to my company and I worked out a deal to go take a sales job for a while, because I knew I could make as much money. And I was going what I really know today. And what I did is wanted to get rid of the stress. I went backwards.
Right.
And the first thing that I found out is that I lost all of my perks. And what he's saying is the perks are for the position, not you.
Yeah. You
don't deserve the perks. The position does.
Right.
When you're the alpha or the leader or all of that. And as soon as I went into the sales position, made just as much money, and they brought me into the position in such an amazing way. It was great. But once I actually started working, there was no perks, no respect.
Right.
I was just another salesman.
Yep.
It was hilarious. I mean, just overnight. Like, wow.
Right.
Okay. Very good, humbling experience for me, for sure. So leaders obviously set the tone. And one of the things that he was saying, just going to that humbleness and obviously the perks go to the position only. So when you are in that leadership, you should share your mistakes.
Yeah.
You should be open. And that's really how you're going to build that trust and that rapport is through your actions and being vulnerable and really exposing that you're human, no different than them.
Right. Yep. And be willing to look at yourself as part of the problem.
Because as a leader, the one thing that I've realized, and I think I even have it in my notes somewhere, it doesn't matter.
Right.
If you're the leader, guess what?
It's your fault.
It's your fault. Always. It's always your fault.
Yep. He shared a story of doctors, back in the day before modern medicine, and they were contracting disease and then spreading it. And they didn't know what the cause was, but there was this disease that was coming from dead bodies that was getting passed around to other people, and it was killing them. And so the doctors were unwilling to take a look at themselves and realize that they could be part of the problem. But what they were doing back then was the doctor would do an autopsy on a body, maybe sort of clean up, maybe not do anything at all, and then go do an operation on another patient. And he would pick up the disease from the dead body and transfer it to a living person. And so that doctor was the problem. But there were many times, I think he was sharing that somebody tried to bring it up to the doctors that they were part of the problem, and they were saying, can't be us.
There is a case study on this. It was like 20, 30 years. And the funny part about the ending of this story is that all the deaths pretty much went away when they started washing their hands.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That was the solution.
Wash your hands. After touching a dead body.
And they denied it for 20 years.
That's insane.
You're right. No, and they fought it for 20 years saying, wait a minute. It is amazing how we can be in denial.
Right.
And so, we just have to face our own mistakes. And sometimes just like that, the more that we start to do that, the better we get.
Yeah.
And the more quicker and better we can actually deal with them and then learn with others. I really go back to the Seth Godin book, Factory Workers. There's a lot of areas of how we got here.
Here being what? What do you mean?
To where we're at today with the economy. Everything that we're talking about, going from caveman to how we're at today.
Okay.
So what we're really going to go back is how did we get here? Now we're really only going to talk about back 100 years.
Okay.
How did we go from basically cowboys to the factory world to here?
Okay.
Because really the main difference between 1,500 years is really 100 years ago, we went into the Industrial Revolution with factory and all of that. So what he's saying is how did we get here? New technologies, crazy, unprecedented times, 1920s.
Yeah.
Because back then, TV was, woo! I'm telling you, man, the 20s was crazy. We came out with TVs. That's huge.
Yeah.
Radio. Factories, cars,
production lines.
Wow, in a 10-year period.
Yeah.
And so we had movie stars, we had national athletes, fame came about, alpha status in a different way than we've ever seen.
Right.
And then waste became rampant because we had more food, we had all of this. And so getting back to how did we get here? Well, then nature came in October 1929, Black Tuesday. Very memorable day in American history, the start of the Great Depression. waste and excess that we just left the 9 years of went away.
Right.
No longer, not at all. And so we get through that, and then we get through that in about a 10-year period, and then we, not a 10-year period, probably, 30, a little bit over 10 years, and we go into World War II.
Yep. Which
is really a fun time to talk about because everyone was part of the effort. Hardship and service was the norm. 90% approved of the war and of the military.
It's crazy.
War was in everybody's heads.
Right.
And everybody came together. It was truly a civil rights movement in itself without the push. And why I say that is because colored neighborhoods, colored communities went to work. Either they were building ships, building supplies for with white people. Women were working for the first time in the workforce. It really opened up an immense, because we came together as a team. We all, as a country, believed in what we were doing, and we all came together to fight the war.
Yeah.
Everywhere you went, we were all in it.
Right.
Nobody was not part of it, and that was a huge difference. And then the 50s came, the boomers. And so the boomers really started the hippie movement. And they really, actually, the boomers started off probably as going to be one of the greatest segment of population. I mean, they started off great, 60s. I mean, we're talking I Have a Dream.
Sure.
March. I mean, unbelievable. They started it off. They were really, because of World War II, they were able to work right off of that.
Right.
And they had the civil rights. If you really study history, the boomers made some amazing course changes.
Yep.
Then they changed.
Right.
And then the rising wealth and affluence was their new movement, starting like in the 80s and really the 70s. And then something that really happened is Nixon really made the American public really trust the government. All right, maybe I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm...
right.
So we have now trust issues with the government through Nixon, and we really enter the me generation, and that's the boomers. Once they got into, the 30s making money and really booming, they were the me generation. Globalization came.
Mm-hmm.
So all segments during this, reason they're called the boomers, because they were in the boom.
Right.
All segments, from poor to wealthy, were growing and doing better and better. I'm not saying that the poor growth rate was at the same rate as the wealthy rate, but everybody was doing better and better, and we were really a pretty happy country.
Right.
And then the boomers got into Congress in the 80s and the 90s. What was referred to as the pig and the python, because they came in so many so fast. It just happened to be a segment of math that happened.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people had babies, I guess, during a certain time, and a big bulk of population came in.
Right.
And so what happened is they were able to take charge. According to Simon Sinek, and I would say I don't disagree with him, I don't have any reason to, he believes that they divided Congress. Not today, not
sure.
He believes that the boomers created the divide.
Sure.
He shows example after example that prior to the 80s and the 90s, Republicans that didn't like their Democratic rivals during the day could easily go have dinner and have a great night together. They went to houses, and it didn't matter if Republican, friends. Democratic after 6 o'clock. That was the rule.
Right.
After 6 o'clock, it doesn't matter which side.
Yeah.
Before 6 o'clock, okay, we're at war. And they loved it, and that's kind of how they know. And in the 80s and the 90s, no, and it's just gotten worse.
Yeah.
So today,
terrible.
If you're a Republican, you're hated by the left, or if you're on the right, it's just incredible. And so then the next ring in the how we got here, which I thought was very important. Because another intense statement. The day we embraced layoffs Now, my dad was the president of the union of the factory of the paper mill that I was around. And I went to all kinds of strikes with him. I went to his meetings all the time. He was an arbitrator. He was heavy into this. Probably one of the most passionate things in his life was to eliminate layoffs. Mm-hmm. So when I was reading this, I was like, wow. And so what happened is we had a Patco, airline controllers is a company, and they threatened to go on strike.
Okay.
And at the time, it was illegal. So is what the laws were for unions is that if there's any harm to the public or social fabric, like a doctor, a nurse, you can't strike.
Right.
And so they were going to do it anyways. And so what happened is Reagan was able to go out and order them not to. So some of them broke the strike and came. And then he went to the military and he gathered every airstrike person he could, and he assembled a group, and we were able to kind of maintain
air traffic control, right?
Air traffic control.
Right.
And the guys down on the airstrip controlling it's a very important job.
Yeah.
And so it would have shut down. If they would have striked, it would have shut down the whole airline industry.
Right.
Everything would have come to a stop. And our economy couldn't have dealt with it.
Right.
So Reagan, in a short-term thinking, figures it out and gets it going. Obviously with some emotion, not knowing all the details.
Yeah.
He goes ahead and fires all 11,000
of
of
them.
them. And he doesn't stop there. He bans them from ever coming back to work.
Right.
In that
for the FAA, yeah. Which is kind of the only major thing in that field.
So, and what Simon Sinek says is he's not trying to say he made a wrong or bad decision, because we can get into a very strong debate about it was illegal for them to do that. There's a lot of reason why he did it. But what he missed is the long-term effect of it. Nothing to do with this specific situation, but it was a situation that his actions allowed. His actions showed this is how you deal with it.
He set the tone and made it okay for any other businessman, any other CEO to lay off 10,000 people at a time.
Exactly. Now, if you got a CEO that is a linchpin, it's okay. He's going to use it intelligently. Unfortunately, most of our companies are not that, and so they've used it in all the wrong reasons, but they're justified in doing it.
Right.
Because
it's seen as normal at this point. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so we never had mass layoffs. We had layoffs prior to that, but they were always based upon forced.
Sure.
It wasn't that, hey, if we lay off all these people, we'll be financially in a better situation.
We're not going to make as much money as we wanted to, so we're going to fire all these people, lay them all off so that our numbers look better.
Right. That just did not happen.
Right.
It wasn't acceptable, and it shouldn't be.
Right.
And then the next section of my notes is a great one. And of course, I'm looking at you when I say this. Abstraction kills.
Okay.
What he's talking about is emails, text messaging, on and on. Whenever we're communicating, when we can't see each other, when we can't touch or eyes, behavior, you hear me. I complain about this.
Right.
All the time.
Right.
It drives me nuts. And so it's that human connection.
Yep.
And so is what he's saying is that we're losing employees. We're losing control even as a leader because we're not making those human connections. It makes sense for you to walk up to an employee and just put your hand on them. Hey, man, I saw you did a good job. Those things matter.
Yes.
An email, hey, good job, is not nearly as impactful as walk up, hey, you did a good job.
Yep. He's also talking about how when we separate ourselves in that way as leaders, we can disconnect from the people, right? He said when we separate ourselves from reality and the customer or the employee, we're willing to do bad things we wouldn't do if we had that face-to-face, that touching relationship, that closeness. And that's a big deal.
And you're right on target. He started off to set the tone with this. Hitler killing Jews. Mm-hmm. How did 1/4 of the whole government? We're talking a lot of people How did they just kill people?
Put up with it.
Just killing thousands and thousands. I mean, it's unbelievable mindset. And so it's like, it's unfathomable. You can't understand it. So they went and did tests, and it kind of scares me. And if there was one story that we missed, and I probably wouldn't be sad, but we should tell it because it's real. Mm-hmm. And that is that they did a test. And so what they did is they took and they created a fake example. And so these students, which were actually the doctors, or psychologists in the experiment, and they'd put them in a hidden room, and then the volunteers for the experiment were there to apply electronic treatment to improve them or whatnot. And so they start off with the first test with the patient in the background. They can hear him screaming, stop, man, this hurts, and all this, and all these things that they can kind of hear it. And then they have a certain percentage of people that go out. And I forget the exact number, but where the number gets really scary for me is that they go, and I won't go through the whole story, but where they end up. And so I think it was like, 30% still, even with all of that, still kept going.
Right.
70% couldn't take it.
Kept shocking higher and higher.
Higher and higher.
Right.
And then I think when they were in the room and they'd have it put them on the hand, it was like, 86%, I think, couldn't do it. And then 70% in the room, and they can hear him.
Right.
Now they're going to go in a room and they can't hear him and they can't see him, nothing. 65% of the people went to death.
Crazy. So when you're disconnected from them, you can't see them, you can't hear them, you're willing to kill them.
You're willing to kill them.
Because you have somebody else telling you to do it. That's crazy.
And I think it's because you disconnect from the emotions of it. You're not killing them.
Right.
You're not doing anything. You're just doing a couple, I'm not killing anybody.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Just pressing a button.
It's the perception. It's the mindset. And so I was really amazed with that. And so, and then he gives a couple examples of companies going to hide behind the law. Mm-hmm. So, and we start off with, we're trying to get leaders to do the right thing, have a moral high ground. And so he even uses one of our favorite companies, Apple. But he starts off with the Peanut Corporation of America. Mm-hmm. And what they did, it's just doing you got to do the right thing. So the largest salmonella breakout in U.S. History came from the Peanut Corp of America. Right. And they weren't willing to, they could have prevented it, and they didn't, to make a long story short. And so they hid behind the law, is what they did. They got away with it to a certain degree, hiding behind the law. Right. The point here is that a long-term smart plan? Because do you think that America trusts Peanut Corp of America anymore? No way. No way. Not at all. Apple. And now Apple has a great why. They've done some great things, and they were able to get through this, but they started something really bad. And in 2009, they went offshore to
Ireland?
Ireland, right. And so basically what they're doing is, so they took all of their profits, offshore funds, and I forget, for another country, and they put it into Ireland. And what it was is that basically the laws fell in the cracks in between the two countries, and the two countries weren't cooperating. And so in Apple knew that, and their attorneys were able to see, okay, these countries, so avoid there's taxes. A loophole here. Yeah. Let's put all of this country's money into here, and so then the United States can't tax us. Right. Billions of dollars we're talking about. Right. And actually not billion, tens of millions specific in the taxes, off of billions untaxed. And it was through 2009, 2012. And we still hear about it. So, destructive abundance.
Let's talk about it.
Kind of the next stage. In the first company that he talks about is Goldman's.
Okay.
Coming from the yacht industry, I'm very familiar with Goldman's. And so I didn't know the positive story. I have a very, very ugly connotation towards Goldsman. So this was a great story. So 1970, Goldsman. I love this mantra they had. Long-term greedy. Well, greedy's not good. Yeah, it can be if it's done in the right way. Or it's a word. So
right. They're playing
their
with
context was different.
Right.
So what it was is take a short-term hit for long-term rewards.
Right.
Wow, what a concept.
Right.
It's everything that we're about. Don't get stuck in the weeds on only getting short-term gains, because you will pay the consequences of that in the long term.
Right.
And so to have a mantra, and that's what they were known for. And they said it. They didn't hide behind it.
Right.
Which I thought was amazing. Now, this is the great thing. The perception of Goldman's bankers that they would do the right thing. They were the banker Boy Scouts was the name they had then.
Right.
And what the perception continued to be was the needs of Goldman's bankers was, the needs of the bank was over the bankers. Meaning that they put the company over their own needs and priorities. And what happens is you have long-term growth. You have long-term sustainability growth, that inner circle, that safety. And so, as we know, Goldman didn't stay that way.
Right.
So, in the 90s, they go to a bold, aggressive kind of way of doing business. And so they're going to change their culture. Because
they got a new leader, right?
They got a new leader, yeah. Thank you. And so they got a new leader. And he is, and especially in this time, we have a lot of boilerplate environments going on in business. Wall Street, everywhere.
Right.
It was just rampant. And this is that kind of leader. He's a dopamine, incentive-based leader.
Yeah. All
the way. And which is short-term gains. Mm-hmm. And when you're only worried about the short-term gain, your plan starts to be not in line with the long-term plan. So to make a long story short, where'd we go? 2010, the bailout following big bonuses to Goldman Sachs executives.
Right.
Lang, the CEO at the time, comes out and says he's sorry. What? What? You're sorry? You paid your executives all this money.
Right.
And then you come and take a government bailout, and then you can say you're sorry?
Right.
So obviously the perception and where they've gone is not the right place.
Right.
Yeah. So goes the leader, so goes the culture.
That's right.
As you were just stating, they made a change. So thank you guys. We really appreciate the audience listening to us. We'd really appreciate it if you would just click down below and hit subscribe.
Yes.
Even more importantly, we would really love it if you'd go to our iTunes channel, write some great reviews about us.
Rate us.
Rave us, exactly. And we would really definitely appreciate that.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.